differences in people. Differences can be strengths, not weaknesses.
Welcome to Silicon Slopes. Today, Silicon Slopes Town Hall. We are calling this one and this whole series Amplify. For our community to truly understand how it can build a better Utah country and tech community, we must first look within and be willing to listen and grow. This series, Amplify, which is part of the Silicon Slopes Town Hall programming, hands the microphone to those within our community whose voice and experience needs to be heard most right now. With that, I want to bring in Sarah Danzy-Jones, the co-founder of Women Tech Council and president of Inclusion Pro, who will join me in moderating this discussion and leading out and moderating this discussion. Our panelists today are Nikki Walker, Brand Experience and Community Engagement Director at Domo, James Jackson, who's the Executive Director of the Utah Black Chamber, Vice President of Supplier Diversity Program Manager at Zions Bank, and Sean Newell from the NAACP, the Utah Multicultural Civic Council, Utah Black Roundtable, and the Vice President of Business Development the Vice President of Business Development at the Utah Black Roundtable and at Industrial Supply. Sarah, please lead us off here.
Wow. Well, I am thrilled to be here and to take on a really important conversation. I think to the people of color on this panel, it's not a new conversation. And what is exciting, I think, for everyone is to be able to face it more head on, face racism more head on than we've been able to do in the past. This has been, I think, it has been a hard time on many, many levels for so many people. And I definitely would love to hear more from Nikki and James on the impact to the Black community. I'm able to sit from the industry side and kind of see the reactions. Maybe what is different this time? You know, I think that's maybe an important conversation point we ought to tackle is, will this be different than in previous times when race has come to the forefront? And what will be different this time? I'm excited about the conversations that have happened. I'm been able to be privy to a number of different conversations behind the scenes. I can tell you that we are talking, we are thinking, we're learning, we're growing. And that is so exciting for someone like me who does a lot of work around consulting in this space, to see the change and to see the motivation shift toward a more, I guess, honest conversation about the role that racism plays in our workplaces and beyond. I spend a lot of time on the industry side, and I know that Nikki and James and Sean spend a lot of time also in the civic side and the community side. And so I definitely want to just note that, you know, from Women Tech Council, I sit on the Silicon Slopes Commons Board. There's a lot of conversations that are being had around being proactive. So I'm going to stop there and turn the time over to our important guests to lead out on this conversation. Thank you.
So was that a question or is that?
I wasn't sure if Clint was going to jump in. James, why don't you, James is the executive director of the Black Chamber. Love your thoughts. What are you seeing? And what can we do?
What can we do is a loaded question, to be honest with you, because there is so much that we can do. And I appreciate people reaching out to us on asking that question. I'm so grateful that I work for a company that allows me to leverage my platform and allows me to do what I need to do. You know, if I was doing what I'm doing now at any other gig, I would imagine that I probably wouldn't have a job at this point because it's been pretty busy, pretty overwhelming experience for me. And I'm glad people's eyes are opened. It's just crazy that everybody's eyes are opened all at once. And we're just managing the best way that we can at this moment, because we want their eyes open and continue to be open and and answer their questions as much as possible. So Nikki, feel free to jump in because I probably can answer this question and spend good 45 minutes answering this question on what can you do. But I'm going to kind of direct it towards Silicon Slopes right off the jump. Tech companies here locally in Utah, I feel have a huge platform. I saw it with COVID-19 on all and everything that the Silicon Slopes community did there, from testutah.com to having the test there, and really striving to help the community become safe, and get back to business as soon as we possibly can. And I appreciate those efforts. And with that type of reach and that type of platform, that same thing can be done within this next pandemic that we're in right now. And really leveraging that platform to be the voice that's much larger than my voice. It's much larger than a lot of the Black voices there, where we've been trying so long to speak about these issues, that's been happening, going all the way back since 1619 when we were first brought here, our ancestors, and nothing has changed. Things changed, but foundationally, nothing has changed. And what we're looking right now is just larger voices to help being those elements of change.
If I could just jump in right here, really great segue to something I definitely wanted to talk about. And as Sarah mentioned, I do a lot of civic engagement and a lot of community work. In fact, my job at Domo, I'm responsible for community engagement, which similarly to James, I probably would not have a job right now if I was somewhere else, because this work has really taken over a lot of our lives. A lot of Black people who live here in Utah who are indelibly connected to the community. And so not only are we sort of holding each other together, because the level of what we are referring to as racial battle fatigue that we go through on a regular basis has just really been amplified because of these new circumstances and situations that are occurring around us. And it really is important, while we're talking to folks in Silicon Slopes, to understand that leveraging your voice is incredibly important now. And I have a really quick story. Most of you may know that on Thursday-ish, Josh James made a call out to companies in Utah to show their support for the Black community by joining forces with Domo so that we could put out this ad campaign, a Black Lives Matter ad campaign. And we expected to get a dozen people, a dozen companies, a dozen logos. Within 24 hours, we had over 250 businesses, all from Utah, who raised their hand and said, yes, we are standing with you. We are standing with the Black community. Please include us and tell us how we can help. And some of the conversations that have been happening since that ad launched on Saturday, and it will run, I believe, for the rest of the week. And since that, what I've been seeing is really interesting. There are half of our community, when I'm speaking about the Utah community, half of our community saying, well, this is great, this looks good, but is this just a photo op? And, I get the opportunity to speak from experience and say, no, this came from true intention on raising the profile of what is happening. And I think that when leaders recognize that their voices carry more weight, it helps to move any movement forward. So where there were people on Friday who were totally against Black Lives Matter, the movement, after that ad ran, there are now people wanting to discuss this more. There are people going to find out what does Black Lives Matter actually mean? Because I think that there's a huge population of us who don't really understand the messaging behind that. And so with logos like Domo and Adobe and IBM and Women Tech Council and just everyone, all of those amazing logos, I think it is opening up a conversation where people are more willing to talk about it. And right now in this moment, that's what we need. We need people to be willing to have the hard conversations. Otherwise, we won't move anything forward.
Hey, Nikki, that's actually a great point. For the viewers that don't understand Black Lives Matter, will you give a definition and a scope and the intent of the movement?
Sure. So about 5 years ago, I want to say, Black Lives Matter, the organization started. And the hashtag really kind of took over. So if you're not in the community, you may not understand that this is an actual organization with thought on how to move us past police brutality and other things. What the focus is right now, obviously, based on the unfortunate murder of Mr. George Floyd, we're very focused about, and I'm saying we as a community, I'm not a member of the Black Lives Matter organization. I do support it. But there's an actual edict that says this is what we want, right? We want to be treated as human beings, have our opportunity to be judged by 12 peers, as opposed to police officers being the accuser, the jury, the judge, and the executioner, because that's not how things are supposed to go in this America. Regardless of what you think about someone's criminal history or even their behavior in the moment, the reality of the situation is that we have watched over and over and over as white men and boys have swarmed buildings and had assault rifles, and they all make it to trial. The police officers are never in fear for their lives to the extent that they are killing these people on the spot. They are giving them their rightful moments. And in a nutshell, because this is only an hour long, that's the call right now. That is the call from the Black Lives Matter movement. It is about policy change. It is about legislation. It's bigger than individual racism. It is about racism as an institution and what we need to do to begin dismantling those pieces of the institution that are keeping us in this place.
Yeah, so to those people who say, well, all lives matter. Well, if all lives mattered, organizations like the Utah Black Chamber, organizations like the NAACP, Black Lives Matter movement, Human Rights Commission, Equality Utah, supplier diversity councils within supply chain organizations, diversity and inclusion teams within all the companies, all those wouldn't exist because there wouldn't be a need if all lives mattered.
And to that point too, I also like to make it even more succinct. All lives can't matter until Black lives matter. And I think that that's an important soundbite that everybody can take away. Black people aren't saying you matter more. Black people aren't saying you matter less. Black people are saying you matter, and it needs to be acknowledged and recognized.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I see that Sean joined. Sean, are you on video?
Yes, I am.
There you are. He's joining us from outer space. Awesome. I think it's worth having a discussion on why is the term racism such a hard term, right? I think that's contributing to some of the divisiveness that we're seeing because nobody wants to be seen as a bad human being. And so, Sean, from your perspective, why do you think it's so hard to hear that word and kind of come to terms with that?
Well, I think the reason it's so difficult is the term racism comes from way back when. This is a Eurocentric construct that was created to create an atmosphere and a vehicle to subjugate individuals. And until we acknowledge that and have the resilience to be able to say, yeah, that's right and that was wrong, I think we're going to be going in this circle continuously. We have to break and fracture the systemic issues that exist within our communities, our states, and our country. And that means that we have to dig deep. And having entities like Silicon Slopes involved is critical because you have a reach that a lot of us in our communities don't have. You have some influence that we don't have. And you have to be resilient to go into some of your circles and be able to extend that influence so that you can have people really, truly, aside from putting their name on something or writing that they follow and they believe in a cause, but actually have them speak to the reasons this cause needs to be listened to, the reasons that change needs to take place. And that's where we look at when we look at how to really create change. When people say, I want to help, I say, well, you can help every single day. When you hear something derogatory, correct that. When you are in an environment that is uncomfortable for some of the people around you. Correct that. And those little small steps start to fracture these systemic views that exist within our economy and our society.
Thank you. So Nikki, you gave a great description of Black Lives Matter from a policy perspective and from a civic perspective. And we see that tech companies are coming on board. Is the expectation that they support policies, or what do you believe is the expectation of the commitment of tech companies that are supporting Black Lives Matter?
Well, first, I think the commitment needs to be a human commitment that's in connection with the people who you work with and live with in your communities. So Black Lives Matter, the organization, yes, all about policy. Black Lives Matter, the hashtag, the movement, it is a movement that went viral that speaks to the humanness of Black people. And so when we talk about legal policy change, that's one thing. But I think that any company, any organization that is making a commitment to Black lives, they need to be looking at their policies. And that is what is going to convince people that a full page ad is exactly what it is. It is showing support, and this is just the beginning, right? So it has to be that this show of support, this visual optical show of support is supported by something. And so what I believe is being asked of companies is to show, to put their money where their mouth is, invest in trainings about bias, talk about how you can work with HR to reach out to diverse pools of talent. Look at the company ERGs that you have going on. Figure out what your diverse organization needs, right? And what the people who are diverse in your organization needs. Those kinds of real tangible actions, just like when the tech industry, and we still are, but how the tech industry really got behind the idea of gender parity and how they made policy changes. Some companies, if it's a manager or above, they're only doing interviews if there is a female in that pool. And now, while that's not going to make immediate change to what diversity looks like in the organization, it says that we are making an effort. And that is incredibly important right now, because I think, for lack of a better term, Black people feel like we have been given lip service, that people say and have historically said what they thought was going to calm us down, quell our requests, make us have some sense of inclusion, which is a whole nother word that I'm not ready to talk about on this live, because I don't think that everybody even understands what inclusion means, right? And it really isn't about checking a box on your list of things that you must have. It is about truly immersing those diverse individuals into the culture of your company, so that the culture of your company is actually evolving. So that's an important thing. And so when we're looking at all of those companies, and I'm proud to be a Domo Sapien, because I can speak to the fact that that advertisement is backed up by some really good stuff. And so we've moved some actions forward even prior to this, because this is not a trend for us. This is not a wave that we are following. Prior to even the pandemic hitting, Domo instituted some new what do I want to call them? Some new programming that was specifically directed at targeting professionals of color. We worked with the AUC in Atlanta, which is a consortium of Black colleges and universities. And we went and we recruited 10 Black students, cream of the crop. These students are brilliant. They had no idea that Silicon Slopes was a thing. They had no idea what Domo as a company was. And we put together a program that said, this is who we are, and this is why you have a place here. And so our director of diversity and I went and spent 3 days with students and did a formal interview process. And we're really excited about looping them in. Obviously, we had to do a bit of a pivot with COVID, but they're still involved. We're still engaging with them, and we've made some decisions to make sure that they're able to immerse themselves in the Doma culture this summer. So things like that, things that you can point to that are real, that are bigger than words, bigger than hashtags. That's what people are asking for when you are offering your support to the Black Lives Matter movement.
I have a question that comes from the community here on YouTube watching currently. And I'm not sure which of the panelists here want to answer this, but the question is, if a company is thinking about creating a position to really spearhead diversity and inclusion, is there a certain job level that is seen as being serious versus being seen as going through the motions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah,
Sean.
I could speak to that. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and there's been companies that want to put their diversity coordinator within the HR group. But you have to understand a diversity strategy is bigger than just HR. An HR person should be a diversity officer should be at an executive position reporting directly to the CEO. For companies right now, because there are a lot of companies that don't have a diversity strategy, don't have a diversity team, there's nothing happening. And so I was talking to a company the other day about this, and what should we do? We have a PR nightmare because a company employee left us because of racial discrimination, and we have not a very diverse team. Like, where do we begin? And so it's like, well, first thing you do is just reach out to your diverse employees directly. Create an open forum. Don't take a survey. Don't send out an email. It's time to be a high touch, high impact. And so just reach out to them. Now, don't you leverage them as the people to build your diversity team, but listen, understand, and then learn. And then from asking the questions, learning and understanding where they're coming from, where the tension, hurt, and frustration lies, you can start looking at how you want to build your strategy, maybe engaging, some outside consultants. I may know a couple that I can get you in touch with to actually assist you in building that strategy. But definitely a diversity officer should be reporting to the CEO.
Yeah, on that note, there's a little joke going around. I think the people of color, the community, our community, that there's this big push to see more people of color in leadership, but please don't have it all be the chief diversity officer. That is again, another example of lip service. There's so many great talented people, leverage their skills and give them that opportunity to lead in other roles other than the diversity role. And then my only other thought there is that it really, I would never take that role if the whole entire executive team had not gone through some in-depth training. I would not want to be the sole person to carry that load in an organization, and it's just impossible to do. So don't put that burden on that person. Do the work as a leadership team to build capacity at the leadership level and on down, and your efforts will actually be better maximized. Clint, are there any other questions from YouTube?
So there is one on the Beehive. I don't know if any of you read this. It was by Lisa Roger. She wrote something on the Beehive, which is somewhat affiliated here with some of the folks on this call, called "Stand by My Side," and it seemed to really resonate. And it kind of went viral, whatever that term means these days, within the state of Utah, as she talked about her experience as a Black woman in the state and some of the experience she's had, negative experiences and positive experience she's had. And I think that really helped highlight for a lot of folks, kind of what it's like to be Black in Utah. And I wonder if any of you would be willing to talk about that, your own personal experience living in the state of Utah and what that's like.
I'll go first if you don't mind, James.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say if Sean wanted to chime in, since he's been here since 1980, but go ahead.
Haha, yes. Just quickly, on on Friday, my son and I were on the front page of the Deseret News, as featured as one of the mothers, 7 Black women they interviewed in a story about raising Black sons or having Black sons in Utah. And it was really cathartic to be able to share my stories, to be able to share some of the, quite frankly, terrible things that my son and I have had to experience individually and together since we've been here. And so that article's on Des News. Everybody read it and everybody commented on it. And that is where I learned about where I lived most recently. What happened in the comment section was horrifying. Sarah, earlier you asked why it's so difficult to bring up even the word racism. And it's because people aren't ready to have that conversation. The racism is like our oldest sin in the United States of America. We were brought here, our ancestors were brought here to be a permanent underclass, to be slaves, to build up this country. And so people really no one wants to have that conversation. It's difficult. And that thought process really was highlighted in the comment section because there were women who are from Utah who have sons that are not Black or children who are not Black. And they were literally saying, there is no such thing as white privilege. You're afraid of the police. That's your fault. If your kids did what the cops asked them to do, or if you raised your children right, they wouldn't be. I mean, it was horrifying to see other mothers say this, not just to me, but to all 7 of the mothers who had expressed their concerns. And so when you are offered a platform to talk about how it feels to be X, and then people use their privilege to tell you that that is not how you feel, that this is not how it is. It's unfortunate that folks believe that they can speak to your own lived experiences. And I think that that is really where the barrier is. I think that is really where we can't move forward. So when even in having racist experiences in Utah, whether there were microaggressions or they were full on racist moments, there are people who have said to me, "Are you sure that's what they meant? Are you sure?" I'm sure. And so until we get over that hump, I feel like in the community, so policy is going to be made. People are going to continue to push forward and make sure that there are policies that are being put in place that evolve with where we are as a country, as a community, and that recognize the voices of Black people, because at this juncture, we will not let up. And we're fortunate this go round to have allies that don't look like us. There are white people and Black people and brown people and young people and old people and gay people and straight people, and everybody is saying, hey, somebody, Black people are human beings and they're American citizens, and like, let's be civil here. And so that's great, because that's going to happen. The legal stuff is going to happen as long as we keep pushing. Where I'm concerned is about community engagement here, specifically in Utah, with people not even being willing to acknowledge that these things are happening. You can't fix a problem unless you acknowledge it.
Sean,
what? Yeah, please.
I don't know if James was going to speak up or not.
No, man, you go ahead.
I've been here in Utah since 1980 and experienced both overt and covert racism. And it's astonishing that, when I came here, it was not too dissimilar from situations I was in growing up in Southern California because of the desegregation of my schools that I went to. And I find that people here also had a high degree of curiosity, but they just really didn't know how to approach me. And sometimes in approaching me, they made derogatory statements and did not know that. And I tried not to blame people for their ignorance, but there was also a sense for me in understanding that they had to have known a little bit, especially the older people I ran into. They had to know a little bit more about what they were saying that impacted me in a negative way. I have seen some growth here in the community. It's amazing that even with such a small population of African Americans here in Utah, we've been able to acclimate to our environment fairly well because of opportunities given to us by people that have been willing to help sponsor us and mentor us through the system. And I think that that's really critical for all people in the leadership positions to be able to do, to grab somebody. It doesn't matter if they're African American, Hispanic, Asian, whatever they may be, but grab somebody and help them through this system. Because once you add that sense of relationship to that person, they gain a trust in you, you learn trust in them, but then people around you also start to trust that person. And that is critical for us to be able to continue to advance in this community.
Yes, and I agree. Just to piggyback on what you said, I used to give people the benefit of the doubt. They didn't know they meant it that way. That's kind of, I know they were well intended. But I grew up a little naive because I was shy and very passive. And I'm a little more awake now, being, leading the organization that I lead and being a little more engaged in the community. And I'm not giving that an excuse anymore. Now is a time more than ever that people need to educate themselves. I have people within my own family that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And one of my family members asked her family if she can now use the pronoun from she to they. And as hard as it was for me to kind of work on that, I respected that, how they wanted to be identified. And I educated myself, did the homework, so I can respect that person for who that person wanted to be. Right. And so it's up to all of us to educate ourselves too, because there's so many different communities in the world right now. I was at a protest rally for my first one. I told myself I don't know if I can do these, but I went to one because of pride for Black Lives Matter, and they were talking about cutie pox. I was like, cutie pox? What is a cutie pox? And then I did the research and listened to it more, and it was queer and trans for people of color, that are people of color. I was like, oh. There's all these different communities, and it's important that you educate yourself. Because going back to what Nikki was saying about the Salt Lake Tribune comments or Desert News comments, you can't tell us how we feel. To me, that's hard to swallow when people tell us how we feel. Live in our shoes for a little while, and then you can, tell us how we feel. But first, educate yourself on what the Black experience is like by asking us questions, taking time to listen to understand instead of listening to respond. Because since we live in such a divided society right now, it's time right now more than ever to people to really honestly, and forgive me for saying this, to shut up and just listen, because it's the only way that we're going to be able to start uniting and coming together and understanding people and their experience of where they come from in order for change to happen.
I love that. You say listen to learn rather than listen to respond.
Yeah, listen to understand rather than listen to respond.
Listen to
That's
understand.
kind of what we're
yeah.
doing right now, especially on social media. It drives me nuts. I tell people, use your voice more and your thumbs less, because we're trying to push our agenda towards people without even understanding of where they got their agenda from. And so all we're doing now is talking to each other's walls. And until we start understanding each other, we can start breaking down those walls and start developing a connection on some common ground. And that's where the real dialogue can take place.
A lot of the conversation that's happening as folks are watching this live is around moments that you have experienced where you didn't have a voice, and how do we give a voice to those who need it most? And one of the questions is, how can coworkers or the Silicon Slopes community make sure you always have a voice, and make sure that everyone's included and that a voice is given and a microphone is given? I mean, it's kind of the idea behind Amplify. This town hall is to hand the microphone to those whose voices have been drowned out at this point. So how do they do that? A lot of the questions are, how do we give voice? I don't know who wants to answer that. And James?
I just finished. So I was waiting to see if Nikki or Sean wanted to go first on this.
Yeah, I'll address that real quick. The ways that you give voice are various. You can give voice by, like I kind of said before, by standing up. If you hear something wrong, say something. If you see a situation that you wouldn't feel comfortable if it was happening to you, say something or do something. Really understand that what we're talking about here is some resilience from everyone. We've had to have resilience as people for a very long time to be able to withstand the barriers that have been put before us, the heartbreak, the pain, the fears. And what we need are people that have influence to be able to do the same thing, to be able to step up and say, look, I need to be strong. I need to be strong against my peers that are saying, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you talking to those people? Why is he here? And tell them, I'm in a relationship with this person, and that's my friend or that's my acquaintance, and I'm trying to get to learn more about them. Be strong in that. Your peers listen to you a lot more than you may think. And the influence that we have as leaders goes a long way. Even those that aren't standing in front of you during a conversation, they're standing around you, are listening. And have some resilience and have the strength to say, hey, look, that's not right. Like James said earlier, educate yourself, read, find out what the history is, find out where all these problems arise from. And then you look at, how in the world could somebody, based on the history that I've read, still have these same ideologies today, and be willing to fracture those ideologies in some way, shape, manner, or form as an individual, because we all have that influence to be able to do that. We have to be strong with our families. We have to raise our kids the right way. Raise your children. This starts at the very young age when their kids are being influenced. They may be getting influences from outside the home, but you inside the home have the greatest influence over your children. Teach your children to love. Teach your children to care about people, to be compassionate, to understand, and to see that we are different, but we're all the same. There's a phrase that people use all the time: I don't see color. Shame on you. I want you to see who I am. I want you to know what I bring to the table. Teach your kids that. These are some of the difficult things, I think, in a lot of the conversations that take place, because people are afraid to say, well, how do I approach you? Are you Black, African American? Ask me. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to bite. I mean, I got teeth, but I'm not going to bite you. We're all the same. And it's that dialogue, and having true, honest, authentic dialogue is critical for us to be able to move forward. And that's all people want. We want to be treated the same. We don't want any special treatment that you would not expect. We want the same opportunities, the same chances, and to live in the same safe environment that everyone else gets a chance to live in.
It's just really time to just expand your influence. So, you're if you have 5 white people around you, then that might be a little bit of a problem, right? So it's time to expand outside your influence, get a little bit uncomfortable. Myself, Sean, Nikki, and several others, we attend so many community events on a regular basis, and now events are starting to come out, but there's still some Zoom meetings, I guess, you can start attending. But this is the time to really expand your connections, expand outside your network, and start developing these relationships. And the stronger the connection you make, then the more accepting it is to maybe make some mistakes. Just like Sean was saying, just ask the question. Then you'll be more comfortable just to ask the question. Is it okay to say this? Is it okay to say that? But when you have a close connection with Sean Newell, just a big old teddy bear, right? And you just ask him, hey, it's okay if I said it that way, then he'll correct you, or he'll say, yeah, either way. But that's why it's important to start developing those relationships.
So, Clint, maybe I can offer a different way for people to look at giving voice and think about, well, what's the real intent behind that? The real intent is to break down barriers, to not stand divided anymore, and to actually get to know people at a human level. And what I've been so inspired by is just, this is all happening amidst coronavirus, right? One of the deadliest viruses that many of us have ever been faced with. And yet we have people willing to break down barriers to go spend time and to stand by and to ally with people they care about. And so if we can look around us and find those ways, giving voice isn't just about giving a platform. It's about how do we break down barriers so that people can be heard. That's the goal, so that they can be seen and heard as the human beings they are. I believe that's what's being asked. And so I think each one of us can find those ways in our circles of friends, our networks. How are we making people feel more heard and more seen as valuable parts of our ecosystem?
There's another question and maybe Nikki, I'll throw this one to you to get us started here. And it's, have you ever had a moment where you really felt heard or seen? Have you ever been included in a moment or decision that might be considered normal work stuff, but because of your race and the way you'd been treated, surprised you?
I can't say in this moment that I have had that moment. I've been at Domo, I've had the opportunity to materialize thoughts that have been in my head that had to do with diversity or race specifically, that I have not had in other companies, but I've not had a specific moment where I had felt, that there's no place that I've been that I haven't had a voice. I think that's the answer to that. So there's been no time in my career when I felt like I don't have a voice, and then some Black thing came up and now, they want me to be a part of it. That hasn't been my professional experience at all. But I will say that I do know people who have had those moments happen. And in that I've had some very intimate conversations about moving out of that space, right? Because when I mentor people, when I'm sponsoring somebody, one of the things that I always talk to them about, man, woman, Black, white, is about standing in your power. And we all, as leaders, we need to always stand in our power. And Black people, more specifically, in corporate environments, their voices will be reduced if they don't stand in that power. We are in the places that we are in, leadership-wise, company-wise, not because we're Black, but because we're qualified, because we're just as smart as whomever is our contemporary. We have just as much strategic insight. We have just as much marketing acumen. We have all of the same things. And so regardless of what part of you allows you to be shrunken or allows you to let your voice or your light be dimmed, I think that that's a situation that people need to work on individually. But I say to that, folks need to stand in their power, because I've never confused or surprised when I'm asked to help make a decision. That's what I'm there for.
Sean, I have a question for you around, George Floyd's tragic and unnecessary murder has kind of brought us into this challenging and heart-wrenching time as we've seen, protests around the world, and this conversation has begun to, be at the forefront of all of our lives. Do you see anything that gives you hope that this might be an inflection point to better times ahead?
That's a tough one for me. I've seen this same scenario over and over again. And the one difference right now is because of this COVID situation, we have a captive audience. And the awareness, I think, is touching more people to see what is really going on, which is a huge difference from in the past. I mean, we can go all the way back from, the murder of certain members of the Black Panthers to Rodney King to issues in Ferguson, all the way up to this current issue and issues that have happened within the last couple of weeks or the last few days with hangings and a couple of other police brutality incidents, supposed. So I'm hopeful that this doesn't die out after the captive audience is free again, and that we really start to take a look at the issues. We have a couple of mechanisms that have increased visibility through technology, which has been wonderful as well, which I hope will make sure that people really keep these things at the forefront of their minds. But my fear is that when we come out of this COVID incident situation that we're in right now, is we're going to be back into survival mode. People are going to be ramping up their own lives. They're going to put these things aside, and we're going to end up being right back where we were again, where it's in the background. And we can't let that happen. And that's why I really appreciate this opportunity like this to be able to speak, because we want to keep it at the forefront. We want people to understand. We want people to be aware that these incidents are happening throughout our country, and we don't want it to die down. But I always keep a gallon and a half of hope that things continue in a positive way. And I'm hoping that through the leadership of Silicon Slopes and others, that we can continue the awareness.
James, I have a question specifically to you from those watching via YouTube currently, and that is, does anyone have a sector-specific diversity report for Utah companies? I imagine there are huge differences between sectors. If not, where do I start to find that data?
I'm not sure what they mean by diversity report exactly.
Yeah,
You
Sarah,
might know
you
what they're
might
talking about
have.
as far as diversity report. I'm not sure what they mean by diversity report, because there's various ways as far as, you know, tracking diversity. Is it tracking the number of employees coming into a company? Is it the, you know, the type of strategy they have regarding diversity? I'm just, you know, maybe wanting some more information so I can answer that question right. Maybe, Sarah, you may know where they're going with
I'm
that.
not sure either. Sarah, do you have a sense for that one?
You know, Clay, I actually think that's an important point. I don't know that there's a lot of companies publicly disclosing their ethnic diversity data, but the Kemp Gardner Institute at the University of Utah did publish a racial and ethnic projections report just about a year ago, really recent, that gave our projections for our state. And so what's interesting is when I do consulting and I'll ask executives, what % of Utah do you think are ethnic minorities? I'll even get responses like 3%. And I'll think, which version of Utah are you living in? Or maybe you don't know anybody of color. Maybe that's, you know, your reality. But Utah itself is actually, you know, the projections are increasing right now. Our school kids are 30% of our school kids are ethnic minorities, and minorities meaning, you know, different ethnicities other than white. But the reality is that in Salt Lake School District, and there's large pockets of Utah that are actually minority majority now, meaning that most of the kids in those, you know, a majority, over 50%, are different ethnicities. And I think that one of the things that would benefit is for everybody to go download that report. It's free. It's just published by the Kemp Gardner Institute, and to actually look at the actual data that of ethnicity that is in Utah. I think it would surprise people. So if you think about, you know, 3 out of 10 of our school kids are not white, right? And what are, you know, what's the percentage you're hiring into your companies? A lot of these kids are going to school where half of their classmates are not white, and then they come into our companies and it's, you know, 10% or less ethnic minorities. That's a really big shock to them, right? And so I think it would benefit everyone to really understand what is the projections of Utah in 2065. We should be about 35 to 40% ethnic minorities. And that's not a Utah that a lot of people think about. Right? James has done a lot of work at the Utah Black Chamber to remind people of the growing ethnicity that's here in Utah.
And then Domo is going to soon be releasing, probably at the top of next month, a diversity in tech report. We actually had it all finished and packaged, and it's amazing. And the numbers are not surprising, but they still are startling. And we put that on hold, the release of that infographic, because of COVID, and of course the need to be sensitive to the things that were happening. But we're in talks about what the right timing is now. But in the next month or so, you'll have some really meaty information coming from Domo, and some of the work that we've done to research and figure out what this diversity of tech in Utah specifically looks like. So forthcoming.
An interesting report that I would be fascinated by is diversity in leadership. CEOs, executives, management. That would be more of a report I'm interested in, because as Sarah was saying, the Utah Black Chamber, we work pretty diligently on ensuring that we can introduce companies to the qualified diverse talent within the community. One of our biggest membership bases is the nonprofit organizations, and the majority of those are nonprofits that serve the diverse communities. And it's just a way for us to be that funnel to connect them. But we want to be sure that that company understands that we can introduce you to this qualified talent, but you also want to ensure that you have a strategy in place that is welcoming of that talent. Just because you hire a person of color doesn't necessarily mean that you have a culture that's built for a person of color. And so want to be sure you have both of those dynamics covered as well. The Black Chamber doesn't do trainings on inclusiveness within the workplace. We can just introduce you to the talent that does exist locally here. But the reason why I want to see about the diverse leadership that's coming, because there is a lot of this qualified talent locally here. And what are we doing to help increase the diverse leadership? Hiring is one thing, but what are we doing to helping them advance? What are we doing to get them attached to mentors and other training opportunities to help them advance and growth, gain that more visibility? And that's where these employee resource groups become really effective, is to gain that visibility. I was talking with a company earlier that doesn't have an employee resource group, and they do have a few Black employees. And honestly, they feel kind of lost at this moment, because they don't know who to reach out to as far as addressing their tension and frustration and anger going on within inside them. And they haven't really seen much from their executive leadership on as far as what they are going to do as far as committing towards action. And the executive leadership is all white, and they're trying to figure it out themselves, but haven't yet reached out to any of the Black employees to just kind of ask, hey, help us understand what's going on. What do you feel like we can do to make a difference? So it's important that those conversations keep going, but and so we can continue not only just hiring them, but helping the people of color, the Black community, advance through these organizations as well.
I want to make sure that this conversation continues. And, when the full page ad on the Deseret News and the Salt Lake Tribune eventually goes away, and, the news cycle goes away, that we don't stop talking about this. And so for James and Sean in specific, but I also want to, ask you, Nikki, through Domo and organizations that you work with. But James and Sean, how do people get involved with the Black Chamber, with the NAACP? How do they support you? How do they get involved in your organization? And how do we make sure that this conversation continues and doesn't wane and doesn't, once the news cycle leaves, we're not all just talking about the next thing, but we're actually enacting change.
Only
Hey.
60% of sorry, Sean, you can go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, joining and helping is easy. For example, the NAACP, you can go online to the Salt Lake branch of the NAACP and join. The membership, I believe, is $35. One of the historical things I want to point out about the NAACP is there were also 3 white founders to the NAACP. So it's an entity that's there for all people's human and civic rights. So we'd love to have people join. And then other entities and groups that are in the community are all open to everybody from every culture and every race, every ethnicity. There is no entity I can think of that is civil, that is closed to any and everybody. So, and you can reach out to us, and we'd love to be able to help you get directed to groups that you want to donate to, or groups that you want to become a part of, and how you can do that. And we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you don't have to be Black in order to engage in these organizations. You can just be an ally, a supporter. You can, if you have a talent or skill or experience that could help these organizations, that would be great. There was a company that was wanting to donate to the Black Chamber, but they didn't even tell us. They just called us and and said, here's a check, which we would love. I mean, we'll take the money, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they missed the opportunity to really engage with us. And so, I quickly just let her know, I appreciate you. Let's connect further on where we can go from here as far as the relationship, because we're busy right now. It's been, we can get 1 or 2 members a day over the last week, which has been huge for us. But we're looking for more than just people joining the chamber as a member. We want members to engage. We have different committees. We have a committee that's actually all white people, to be honest with you, just because of the talents that they offer, to help us build the bridges. Because that's what this chamber is all about: building bridges to connect our business professionals, our business owners, to the resources and education, and give them better visibility throughout the community. And if you have a platform or an idea or a partnership or an experience that help us do that, then let's connect and let's talk and how we can make that happen.
And also in our corporate communities, if you are a leader in Silicon Slopes, if you are aspiring to be a leader, the way to not lose this when the news cycle changes is to make sure that changes are happening inside of your company now. So if you have policies that are related to race or diversity, it's time to relook at them. It's time to look at them again, make sure that they are still in step with the needs of all of the communities right now, not just the Black community, not just women, but all communities, and make sure that it is aligned with who you are as a company. If your company does not have any statements, any policies, what you don't want to do is wait for the next uprising to happen for your company to have to get with the PR agency and make a statement, right? Nobody wants to do that. We were fortunate because we already had a stance. So it's time to make sure that the people who work for you know what your stance is. And that, I think, is part of that human connection, and is going to help us to continue bridging these gaps.
Well, I can tell you, we're going to continue doing these. This series will continue. I want to thank all of you. I'm sure we'll have all of you back on, and those watching, to submit questions to these, just go to townhall@siliconslopes.com. I'm not going to end it. I'm going to let Sarah, you end it to answer that question as well, and talk about you run an incredible company through Inclusion Pro, and you would have some resources and some guidance for those watching as well. But I do just want to say thank all of you, and let's continue this conversation together.
Thank you. I'll keep this really brief. I have really appreciated just getting to know Nikki and Sean and James. And I think it's about continually expanding our networks. It's about seeing each other as strategic leaders, as friends, as peers, as equals. And the more we can work on that, I think that's where a significant amount of change will happen. I think we absolutely need to do the policy work at our companies, check our missions and values, make sure they're aligned, and make sure we're building the right foundation. But at the end of the day, I really feel like we're all looking for this level of authenticity in this work, that we all mean it, that we all want it, that we believe it, that we really see each other as equals and as friends. And what an amazing opportunity to expand our network of friendship. I think many of us are maybe don't know how. And I have to say that the Black community is one of the most welcoming communities. And I think there should be no fear at all of anyone reaching out to build friendships, to extend support. And I just, hope that everyone sees that opportunity, and that it's real, and that there's just genuine appreciation from the Black community. That's what I have felt. So.
Thank you all. We're going to have another town hall on this topic next Monday at 4 p.m. Thank you to the panelists for taking the time. We'd love to have you back on, and let's continue this discussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.